Hi, I'm Matthew Lapp, host of Matthew Lapp Train Guy Segment Show. Also today in this segment, I'm at the Illinois Railway Museum and continuing episode 264 with part 2. What you see right behind me is Burlington Northern 3. Burlington Northern 3 was built by Electromotive Division in LaGrange, Illinois in 1956 and is the 205/41st diesel locomotive built by that factory and is an E9A type diesel locomotive. Originally, it was built for the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy Railroad and originally was numbered 9989A and was used for pulling streamlined passenger trains on the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy Railroad. In 1970, the railroad merged to the Burlington Northern Railroad, and it was the first two units to adopt Burlington Northern's new livery of Gernstein Green that's named after the president of the railroad, Gerald Gernstein. Also, it was renumbered 9989 and then in 1973 was renumbered 9919. Then it was rebuilt by Burlington Northern's West Burlington shops in West Burlington, Iowa in the 1980s and was renumbered 3. Then it was retired from commuter service in 1997. The Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy, Great Northern, and Northern Pacific Railroads merged to form the. Then it was retired from commuter service in 1997 and was donated to the Illinois Railway Museum in Union, Illinois by the Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad, where it is today. Also, it can sometimes be seen operating and seen pulling the heavyweight passenger train set or the bi-level train set or the Nebraska Zephyr train and seen preserved at the Illinois Railway Museum in Union, Illinois, where it is today, and is seen being used on the museum's tracks sometimes as well. What you see right behind me is Public Service Company of Northern Illinois 7. Public Service Company of Northern Illinois 7 was built by Baldwin in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in 1926 and is the 59309th steam locomotive built by that factory and is an 060T six-wheeler type steam locomotive. This locomotive was used for hauling cars around at the Public Service Company of Northern Illinois Power Generating System in Waukegan, Illinois. Then it was retired and in 1961 it was donated to the Illinois Railway Museum in Union, Illinois, where it can be seen today. In 2020 it was being restored and repainted. Then in 2021 restoration was complete and it was moved to this spot in the coach barn where it can be seen today. What you see right behind me is Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe 2544. Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe 2544 was built by Pullman in 1927 and is a combine car. This car was used on the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railroad and was used for passenger service and carried baggage, and one end is where the baggage compartment is, and also was used on passenger trains when being used on the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railroad. Then later on, this car was retired, and in 1964, it was donated to the Illinois Railway Museum in Union, Illinois by the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railroad, where it is preserved today. And also, it is sometimes used on the heavyweight passenger train that the museum operates as well. What you see right behind me is Boston and Maine 1094. Boston and Maine 1094 was built by Pullman in 1906 and is a cafe car. This car was used on passenger trains on the Boston and Maine Railroad for many years. It has three sections, which is a coach seating area, a small dining or cafe area with tables, and a kitchen. Also, passengers rode on this car, and there was food service that would be expected, but a full-length dining car wasn't required. It was likely used on the Green Mountain Flyer passenger train. In 1942, it was rebuilt into a camp car and was used by railroad workers who would spend the night at a track repair site for the night. As well as that, it was renumbered M3288. Then in 1992, it was bought by the Illinois Railway Museum in Union, Illinois from Boston and Maine successor Guilford Transportation. In 1997, it was moved to the museum and arrived on a flat car. Then it was carefully restored to its cafe car design. Today, it is the last surviving wooden cafe car from the Boston and Maine Railroad and is seen on display at the Illinois Railway Museum in Union, Illinois, where it is preserved today.
What you see right behind me is Union Pacific 900,075.
Union Pacific 900,075 was built by Lima Hamilton in Lima, Ohio in 1949 and is a rotary snowblower. It was originally numbered 097 and was used for blowing snow off the tracks during its career for the Union Pacific Railroad. Then later it was renumbered 900,075. Also, this snowblower is a steam-powered snowblower. Also, the tender it uses is from a Colorado and Southern steam locomotive, and when the locomotive was scrapped, the tender was retained for maintenance of way service. Then in 1979, it was retired and was donated to the Smoky Hills chapter of the National Railroad Historical Society and was displayed at a railroad museum in Kansas City, Kansas. Then in 1993, it was then acquired by the Illinois Railway Museum in Union, Illinois, where it is seen today. In 2019, it was being repainted, and the restoration work lasted till 2021. Today, it can be found here at the Illinois Railway Museum in Union, Illinois, where it is preserved today.
What you see right behind me is Union Pacific 18.
Union Pacific 18 was built by General Electric in Schenectady, New York in 1961 and is the 340/69th diesel locomotive built by that factory, and the B Unit 18B is the 307 340/70th one as well, and is an 8,500 HP horsepower gas turbine type diesel locomotive. This is the first generation of the gas turbine locomotive. Powered by the same engines as jet planes, they were most powerful locomotives ever to run, and the Union Pacific calculated a single unit could haul 734 freight cars, which was a train over 7 miles long at a steady 12 mile per hour. Once in operation, they quickly earned the nickname, which was the parody of the big boy locomotive. The nickname was known as Big Blows because of the deafening noise they made. The Union Pacific rostered the largest fleet of turbine-powered freight locomotives in the world. The 8500s had a GE 15-stage turbine powering a General Electric GT576C1 generator to drive 6 General Electric 752 E3 traction motors. At one time, the Union Pacific claimed turbines hauled 10% of their entire freight. They were initially quite cost-effective despite poor fuel economy because they used residual fuel oils, bunker C oils, from the petroleum industry, and also the units became too expensive to operate, and all the 8500s were out of service by 1970. Then in 1971, the locomotive was sold for scrap to Continental Leasing Group and shipped to Intercontinental Engineering Company of Riverside, Missouri, and was gutted before being donated to the Illinois Railway Museum in Union, Illinois. Also in 1972, the tender was painted black and was used as a water tender behind Union Pacific 844 when it was numbered 8444, and then it was used with Southern Pacific Daylight 4449 when it was painted in its American Freedom colors, and the tender was numbered 907853, but for the Union Pacific. Then it was rejoined with the locomotive set. Then in 1978, it was part of the Kansas City Railroad Museum in Kansas City, Kansas. And then in 1992, it was donated and was moved to the Illinois Railway Museum in Union, Illinois, where it is preserved today. Also, Union Pacific 18 is one of 2 gas turbines left in the world today, and Union Pacific 26 is the other one and is located at the Ogden Union Station in Ogden, Utah. And 18 can be found here at the Illinois Railway Museum in Union, Illinois, where it is preserved today.
What you see right behind me is Chicago, Milwaukee, and St. Paul 992-300.
Chicago, Milwaukee, and St. Paul 992-300 was built by Pacific Car and Foundry in Renton, Washington in 1975 and is a wide vision caboose. This caboose was used on the back of freight trains on the Chicago, Milwaukee, and St. Paul Railroad as the train crew's office. Also, the caboose was used on the Soo Line and was renumbered 162, which said that on the cupola just underneath the windows on the side, and it still had its Chicago, Milwaukee, and St. Paul orange paint scheme when it was used by the Soo Line. And this was once the railroad merged to the Soo Line in 1986. Then later on, it was retired and was then acquired by the Illinois Railway Museum in Union, Illinois, where it can be seen today. In 2016, it was getting a repaint and restoration done on it till 2019, and the project was complete. Today, it is preserved at the Illinois Railway Museum in Union, Illinois, where it is today. What you see right behind me is Amtrak 945. Amtrak 945 was built by Electromotive Division in LaGrange, Illinois in 1982 and is the 806,004-16th electric locomotive built by that factory and is an AEM-7 type electric locomotive. For many years, it hauled Amtrak passenger trains on the Northeast Corridor between Boston, New York, Philadelphia, and Washington, D.C., and ran at speed about 125 miles per hour on the tracks. These locomotives are also nicknamed meatballs by rail fans because these locomotives were designed in Sweden and the AEM 7s were built in the United States, which is why they'd be known as Swedish meatballs. Then in 2018, it was retired and was donated to the Illinois Railway Museum in Union, Illinois, where it is seen today.
What you see right behind me is Chicago, Burlington, and
Quincy 993. Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy 993 was built by the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy Havelock shops in Havelock, Nebraska in 1951 and is a baggage car. This coach was once used to carry baggage many years ago and was used in passenger service on the railroad, and passengers' baggage would even be stored in this car on board while they would ride the train as well. Then in 1970, the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy, Northern Pacific, and Great Northern Railroads merged to form the Burlington Northern Railroad, and it was soon put into maintenance of way service and was renumbered 976090. In 2009, it was acquired by the Illinois Railway Museum in Union, Illinois. In 2010, it was repainted. Sometimes it is seen rolling on the museum's tracks as well. Today, it is mostly the library storage car at the museum as well.
what you see right behind me is Trans-Kentucky Transportation 260.
Trans-Kentucky Transportation Company 260 was built by General Electric in Schenectady, New York in 1967 and is the 361 19th diesel locomotive built by that factory and is a U-28B type diesel locomotive. Originally, this locomotive was used on the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy Railroad, and originally it was numbered 114 and was likely used for mostly hauling freight for many years. Then, in 1970, when the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy, Northern Pacific, and Great Northern Railroads merged to form the Burlington Northern, it was repainted green for the railroad and was renumbered 5458. Then in 1986, it was then retired, and then in 1987, it was sold to St. Louis Auto Shredding Company and was renumbered 260. Then it worked down in Kentucky for the Trans-Kentucky Transportation Company and hauled hopper cars as well and retained that number. Then in 2019, it was acquired by the Illinois Railway Museum in Union, Illinois, where it is preserved today, and sometimes it is seen operating on the museum's tracks as well.
What you see right behind me is Chicago Northwestern 1689.
Chicago and Northwestern 1689 was built by Alco in Schenectady, New York in 1954 and is the 808 61st diesel locomotive built by that factory and is an Alco RSD5 type diesel locomotive. This locomotive was used on the Chicago and Northwestern Railroad and was used for hauling freight cars as well, and was even used for switching cars. Then in 1981, it was sold to Precision National Corp in Mount Vernon, Illinois. Then in 1981, it was resold to B&K Engineering in Wisconsin. It was then leased as Chicago, Madison, and Northern and kept the number to Chicago, Madison, and Northern and kept the number. It was then used by the Central Wisconsin Railroad and still kept the number. Then it was leased to the Western Maryland Scenic Railroad in Cumberland, Maryland, and then used on the Cuyahoga Valley Scenic Railroad in Ohio. Then the locomotive was put on display at the Mad River and Nickel Plate Road Railroad Museum in Bellevue, Ohio. As well as that, it was restored in its Chicago and Northwestern look. Then it was acquired by the Illinois Railway Museum in Union, Illinois, and also it is sometimes fired up and seen operating on the museum tracks as well.
What you see right behind me is Burlington Northern 2.
Burlington Northern 2 was built by Electromotive Division in LaGrange, Illinois in 1954 and is the 197 49th diesel locomotive built by that factory and is an F9B type diesel locomotive. Also, since it's a B unit, it is cabless. Originally, this locomotive was built for the Northern Pacific Railroad and originally was numbered 7002C and used on a Northern Pacific passenger train as well. Then, when the railroad merged with the Great Northern Railroad and Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy Railroad in 1970 to form the Burlington Northern Railroad, it was renumbered 809 and was used in freight service. Then in 1982 it was retired and then was rebuilt by Burlington Northern's West Burlington shops in West Burlington, Iowa in 1990 and was renumbered 2. Then in 1997 it was donated to the Illinois Railway Museum in Union, Illinois by the Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad. And also it is used with Burlington Northern Diesels 1 and 3 as well.
What you see right behind me is Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy 493.
Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy 493 was built by the Budd Company in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in 1956 and is a sleeper car. Also, the car is named Silver Ridge. This car is a 10-6, meaning it has 10 rooms and 6 bedrooms. This car was used for the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy Railroad on the Denver passenger train many years ago, and this coach was used for when passengers would be spending the night on board on the train when going from place to place and had their own compartments to sleep in. In 1970, the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy, Northern Pacific, and Great Northern Railroads merged to form the Burlington Northern Railroad, and this car kept the number when it was used by that railroad. Then it was sold to Amtrak and was renumbered 2678 and was used on passenger trains for Amtrak. It was planned for conversion to head-end power and was renumbered 2879. Then in 1991 this car was retired and was sold to a private owner. Then in 2003 it was then acquired by the Illinois Railway Museum in Union, Illinois, where it is preserved today and sometimes it is carried on the museum's tracks as well.
What you see right behind me is Western Pacific 801.
Western Pacific 801 was built by the Budd Company in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in 1948 and is a baggage car. Also, the car is named Silver Beaver. This car was used on the California Zephyr passenger train for many years and was used in passenger service on the railroad, and passengers' baggage would even be stored in this car on board while they would ride the train as well. Then in 1971, it was then used by Amtrak's Auto Train and was renumbered 135. Later, it was renumbered 1135. Then in 1979, it was sold to the Ringling Brothers Circus and was renumbered MC231. It was likely used to carry animals on board when it was part of the circus train. Then in 1980, it was renumbered 38. In 1983, it was renumbered 39. In 1985, it was renumbered 35. In 1988, it was renumbered 73. Then in 1990, it was renumbered 69. It was then sold to a private owner and had a reporting mark and number IRLX 1167. Then in 2015, it was retired and was soon acquired by the Illinois Railway Museum in Union, Illinois, where it is seen today.
What you see right behind me is Fort Wayne and Wabash Valley 504.
Fort Wayne and Wabash Valley 504 was built by Cincinnati Car Company in Cincinnati, Ohio in 1906 and is a combine interurban car. Also, the car is named Talisman. The car even included a baggage compartment, coach, seating, and a buffet for serving snacks, and a light meals, and a parlor seating area, as well as a huge curved glass solarium windows at the back end of the car. It operated originally for the Fort Wayne and Wabash Valley Railroad between Fort Wayne and Lafayette, Indiana for many years. This is also its original number. It was later converted to all-coach seating. In 1920, it was then used by the Indiana Service Corp where it was renumbered 354. Then in 1930, it was used by the Indiana Railroad and kept the number. In 1932, it was retired and the body was soon a home for a private individual. In 1991, it was acquired by the Illinois Railway Museum in Union, Illinois, and was restored to how it originally looked when built. Today, it is preserved here at the Illinois Railway Museum in Union, Illinois, where it is seen today.
What you see right behind me is Wisconsin Electric L7.
Wisconsin Electric L7 was built by the Milwaukee Electric Railway and Light Company Cold Spring Shops in Milwaukee, Wisconsin in 1931 and is a steeple cab type electric locomotive. Originally, it was used for the Milwaukee Electric Railway and Light Company and this is its original number. Then in 1938, it was used on the Milwaukee Electric Railway Transport Company and retained its number. Then in 1963, it was used by the Wisconsin Electric Power Company and still kept the number, and for many years, this locomotive was used for switching cars as well. Then the locomotive was retired in 1972 and was preserved by the Wisconsin Electric Railway Historical Society, and then in 1988 it was acquired by the Illinois Railway Museum in Union, Illinois, where it is today, and sometimes it is seen operating on the museum's tracks as well.
What you see right behind me is Chicago Rapid Transit 1268.
Chicago Rapid Transit 1268 was built by the St. Louis Car Company in St. Louis, Missouri in 1907 and is a coach trailer. It is designed to be hauled by one or more motorized rapid transit cars. This car was originally used for the Northwestern Elevated and originally was numbered 268. and it ran between downtown Chicago to Evanston, Illinois, and Ravenswood Station in Chicago. Then, in 1913, it became the Chicago Elevated Railway, and the car was renumbered 1268. Then, in 1924, it was used on the Chicago Rapid Transit and kept the number. Then, in 1947, it was used on the Chicago Transit Authority and still retained the number. In 1955, it was retired and was first preserved by Chicago Hardware Foundry in North Chicago, Illinois. Then, in 1964, the car was then acquired by the Illinois Railway Museum in Union, Illinois, where it is today. Also, it is the only preserved wooden trailer from the Chicago elevated system and can be seen at the museum and is sometimes seen operating on the museum's tracks as well.
What you see right behind me is Northwestern Elevated 24.
Northwestern Elevated 24 was built by Pullman in 1898 and is an open elevated platform car. This car was originally used for the Northwestern Elevated and originally numbered 24 and ran between downtown Chicago to Evanston, Illinois and Ravenswood Station in Chicago. Then, in 1913, it became the Chicago Elevated Railway and the car was renumbered 1024. Then, in 1924, it was used on the Chicago Rapid Transit and kept the number. Then, in 1947, it was used on the Chicago Transit Authority and still retained the number. In 1954, it was renumbered S111 and was put into work motor service. Then, in 1958, it was then acquired by the Illinois Railway Museum in Union, Illinois, where it is today. Also, it is sometimes seen operating as well.
What you see right behind me is Milwaukee Electric
Railway and Light Company.
972.
Milwaukee Electric Railway and Light Company 972 was built by St. Louis Car Company in St. Louis, Missouri in 1927 and is a streetcar. This car was originally used on the Milwaukee Electric Railway and Light Company. For many years, this car was used for hauling passengers from station to station as well. In 1938, it was used by the Milwaukee Electric Railway and Transport Company and kept the number. Then, in 1953, it was used by the Milwaukee and Suburban Transit and kept the number. Then, the car was retired, and in 1958, it was acquired by the Illinois Railway Museum before it had this name and had the original name when it was located on the grounds of the Chicago Hardware Foundry in North Chicago, Illinois, till the museum's relocation to Union, Illinois in 1964 as well. Today, it can sometimes be seen operating on the museum's tracks as well.
What you see right behind me is Illinois Terminal 233.
Illinois Terminal 233 was built by the St. Louis Car Company in St. Louis, Missouri in 1905 and is an interurban office car. Originally, before it had a number, it was just named Missouri. The car was built for the Illinois traction system. After only a few years, it was rebuilt as a parlor and office car. In 1909, it was used by the Illinois Traction, where it gained the number, which was 233. In 1928, it soon became the Illinois Terminal, and it kept the number. It often paired with Observation Car 234 in later years. It even hauled passengers as well. In 1956, it was retired and was then acquired by the Illini Railroad Club. It also had its motors removed. Then in 1968, it was acquired by the Illinois Railway Museum in Union, Illinois, where it is seen today.
What you see right behind me is Chicago, Aurora, and Elgin 308.
Chicago, Aurora, and Elgin 308 was built by Niles Car Company in Niles, Ohio in 1906 and is a wooden interurban car. This line was originally known as the Aurora Elgin in Chicago, and this is the original number. Then in 1922, the name was changed to Chicago, Aurora, and Elgin, and the car kept the number. This car spent many years hauling people from station to station in the Chicagoland area for many years. Then in 1957, the Chicago, Aurora, and Elgin ceased operations, and in 1962, the car was sold to the Indiana Transportation Museum in Noblesville, Indiana. Then in 1996, it was sold to the Illinois Railway Museum in Union, Illinois, where it is today and can sometimes be seen operating on the museum's tracks as well.
What you see right behind me is Indiana Railroad 65.
Indiana Railroad 65 was built by Pullman in 1931 and is an interurban car. This car was used for the Indiana Railroad in the state of Indiana for many years, and this is its original number. Then in 1941, it was used by the Cedar Rapids and Iowa City Railroad and was renumbered 120 and was used in the state of Iowa. Also, this car spent its entire career hauling passengers from station to station for many years. Then, in 1953, it was retired and it was acquired by the Illinois Railway Museum in Union, Illinois, before it had the name, and when it was located on the grounds of the Chicago Hardware Foundry in North Chicago, Illinois. Then the museum relocated to Union, Illinois in 1964. Also, it is the first piece of equipment to be added to the museum's collection. As well as that, it can sometimes be seen operating on the museum's tracks as well.
What you see right behind me is Illinois Terminal 234.
Illinois Terminal 234 was built by Danville Car Company in Danville, Illinois in 1910 and is an interurban parlor observation car. This car spent many years on the system. It was originally built for the Illinois traction system and was originally named Champaign. It also carried William Howard Taft, who was the 27th president of the country, over the system for a special charter. In 1927, it was then renamed Sangamon. Then a year later, the Illinois traction became the Illinois Terminal and the car kept the name. In 1936, it gained a number which was 234. The car was often paired with car 233 as well. In 1956, it was retired and was then acquired by the Illini Railroad Club. It also had motors removed. Then in 1968, it was acquired by the Illinois Railway Museum in Union, Illinois, where it is seen today. Also, this car is the only interurban car built by the Danville Car Company and the only platform observation car from a Midwestern interurban line surviving today and can be found here at the Illinois Railway Museum in Union, Illinois, where it is today.
What you see right behind me is Chicago, North Shore, and Milwaukee.
801-802. Chicago, North Shore, and Milwaukee 801-802 was built 801-802 was built by the St. Louis Car Company in St. Louis, Missouri in 1941 and is an electroliner. This car is an articulated four-car train set and it has a streamlined body. It was used in the Chicago area and was used on the Chicago North Shore and Milwaukee line, and people would even ride on it. And also, it ran between Chicago, Illinois, and Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Also, each end coach is divided at the side doors into a luxury coach, which seats 30, and a smoking coach, which seats 10 and also has a restroom. Each door had steps and a trapdoor for boarding from street level, low level, and high level platforms. One center coach seats 40, and the other is a tavern lounge that seats 26, where you could have an electro burger as well. All cars are air conditioned as well. Also, it is one of only two electroliners built, which the other one is 803, 804, and is at the Rock Hill Trolley Museum in Rock Hill Furnace, Pennsylvania. Then it was used on Philadelphia suburban transportation in 1963 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and it kept the number and was repainted as well. Then it was used on the Southeastern Pennsylvania Transportation Authority in 1970, and it was repainted for that one and also kept the number. Then later on, this train set was retired, and in 1982, it was acquired by the Illinois Railway Museum in Union, Illinois, where it is today. And it was like how it was when it retired, and then it was repainted to its original paint scheme and was restored to operation, and also it operated on the museum tracks for a while and was taken out of service for a while. Then in 2016, restoration was started on it. It then returned to service in 2021 and operated on the museum tracks once again. Today, it is still preserved at the Illinois Railway Museum in Union, Illinois, where it is today.
What you see right behind me is Chicago and Northwestern 7700.
Chicago and Northwestern 7700 was built by American Car and Foundry in St. Charles, Missouri in 1923 and is a combine car. This car was used on the Chicago Northwestern Railroad and was used for passenger service and carried baggage, and one end is where the baggage compartment is, and also was used on passenger trains when being used on the Chicago Northwestern Railroad. Then later on, this car was retired, and in 1985, it was acquired by the Illinois Railway Museum in Union, Illinois, and also it is sometimes used on the heavyweight passenger train that the museum operates as well.
What you see right behind me is Chicago, Rock Island, and Pacific
19135. Chicago, Rock Island, and Pacific 19135 was built by the Chicago, Rock Island, and Pacific Railroad shops in 1965 and is a transfer caboose. This car was built from Chicago, Rock Island, and Pacific Boxcar 14867. Also, it was then used for maintenance of way on the Chicago, Rock Island, and Pacific Railroad. Then later on, this caboose was retired and was then acquired by the Illinois Railway Museum in Union, Illinois, and sometimes it is carried around on the freight train set on the tracks as well.
What you see right behind me is Grand Trunk Western 6323.
Grand Trunk Western 6323 was built by Alco in Schenectady, New York in 1942 and is the 696 29th steam locomotive built by that factory and is a 484 Northern type steam locomotive and is a U3B class steam locomotive. For many years, this locomotive has operated on the Grand Trunk Western Railroad and was used to haul passenger trains for the Grand Trunk Western Railroad. The engine worked on both the Canadian National and Grand Trunk Western systems, and it had the distinction of being the last steam locomotive to carry a mainline train for the Grand Trunk Western Railroad by going between Detroit and Durand, Michigan in 1961. Later that year, it was sold to Fred Crew, and he had it displayed in Detroit, Michigan. Then, in 1973, it was sold to Illinois Railway Museum member Robert Johnson. In 1981, it was moved to the Illinois Railway Museum in Union, Illinois. Then, in 1994, it was bought by the museum where it is today. Also, Grand Trunk Western 6323 is one of two surviving Grand Trunk Western 484s left in the world today, and 6323 is at the Age of Steam Roundhouse in Sugar Creek, Ohio, and 6323 is on display here at the Illinois Railway Museum in Union, Illinois, where it is on display today. What you see right behind me is Chicago Great Western W52. Chicago Great Western W52 was built in the 1900s and is a boom car. This car was used on the Chicago Great Western Railroad and is also an idler flat car, and it would hold tools as well and was used for maintenance of way service on the railroad as well. Then later on, it was retired, and then in 1990, it was acquired by the Illinois Railway Museum in Union, Illinois, where it is today. And also, it is a boom car for Chicago Northwestern Crane 6363 as well, and is sometimes carried around on the freight train sets as well.
What you see right behind me is Chicago Northwestern 6363.
Chicago and Northwestern 6363 was built by Bucyrus Foundry and Manufacturing Company in Bucyrus, Ohio in 1925 and is a 160-ton crane. This crane was used on the Chicago and Northwestern Railroad for maintenance of way service and is also a diesel-powered crane and went out on work duty with a flat car between the crane and engine and would even be used for lifting and lowering things as it would be used for maintenance of way service on the Chicago Northwestern Railroad. Then later on it was retired, and then in 1990 it was acquired by the Illinois Railway Museum in Union, Illinois, where it is today. In 2020 it was given new trucks and it was soon being repainted, and then about 2023 it was soon looking good as new. Then the progress was soon completed. Today it is preserved here at the Illinois Railway Museum in Union, Illinois, and sometimes it gets fired up and is sometimes carried around on the freight train sets as well.
What you see right behind me is Lehigh, New England 207.
Lehigh in New England 207 was built by Baldwin in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in 1936 and is the 619/22 steam locomotive built by that factory and is an 060 six-wheeler type steam locomotive. This locomotive was used for switching cars around on the Lehigh New England Railroad and also used for hauling a freight train as well. Then it was sold to the Nicholson Terminal and Dock Company in River Road, Michigan, and was renumbered 14. Then it was retired, and in 1966 it was sold to B.J. Pollard in Detroit, Michigan. Then in 1968 it was sold to Herbert Hansen in Elgin, Illinois. Then in 1974 it was then acquired by the Illinois Railway Museum in Union, Illinois, where it is today. Also, it is the only surviving Lehigh and New England steam locomotive left in the world today and can be found here at the Illinois Railway Museum in Union, Illinois, where it is today.
What you see right behind me is Chicago Northwestern 411.
Chicago and Northwestern 411 was built by Electromotive Division in LaGrange, Illinois in 1949 and is the 8569th diesel locomotive built by that factory and is an F7 type diesel locomotive. This locomotive was originally numbered 4082C and was built for commuter service on the Chicago Northwestern Railroad, and for many years it was used to haul passenger trains along the system. Then in 1971 it was renumbered 411. It was then sold to Metra in 1977 and was leased back to Chicago Northwestern. It was later used on the Metra commuter line and was renumbered 305. It was then used to pull commuter trains from locations in and out of Chicago, Illinois. Then the locomotive was retired, and then in 1983 it was acquired by the Illinois Railway Museum in Union, Illinois, and it came to the museum in 1999 and was still in its Metra paint scheme. Then in 2006 it was repainted in its Chicago Northwestern livery and numbered 411. Today it is preserved at the Illinois Railway Museum, where it is seen today and had been restored to operation and can be seen hauling the bi-level train mostly as well. Also in 2011, it went to Rock Island, Illinois for the Train Festival event with Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy diesels 9911A and 9255, along with the Nebraska Zephyr passenger train, and then came back to the museum as well. It was also featured in the film Chicago Fire, filmed in 2013. In 2014, the locomotive was taken to the North Carolina Transportation Museum in Spencer, North Carolina, along with Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy 9911A, and which is also another resident of the museum. And another diesel that it worked with on Chicago Northwestern, that's also part of the collection, but later joined some years afterwards, which is number 515. And they were part of the 26 Streamliners that were part of the event there. Then, after the event, it was towed back to the museum and still operates at the museum as well. Also today, it is preserved at the Illinois Railway Museum in Union, Illinois, where it is today, and can be seen hauling the bi-level cars mostly as well.
What you see right behind me is Chicago Northwestern 1.
Chicago Northwestern 1 was built by the St. Louis Car Company in St. Louis, Missouri in 1955 and is a bi-level coach. This car was once used on the Chicago Northwestern passenger trains many years ago and was used as part of a commuter train on the railroad. Then later it was used on the Metro commuter line and was renumbered 7600 and would run on trains from locations in and out of Chicago, Illinois. Then later on the car was retired and in 1988 it was then acquired by the Illinois Railway Museum in Union, Illinois, where it is today. It was even featured in the film Chicago Fire, filmed in 2013. Today, it is used part of the bi-level set and seen running on the museum track sometimes as well.
What you see right behind me is Chicago Northwestern 6.
Chicago and Northwestern 6 was built by the St. Louis Car Company in St. Louis, Missouri in 1955 and is a bi-level coach. This car was once used on the Chicago and Northwestern passenger trains many years ago and was used part of a commuter train on the railroad. Then later it was used on the Metro commuter line and was renumbered 7605 and would run on trains from locations in and out of Chicago, Illinois. Then later on the car was retired and in 1988 it was then acquired by the Illinois Railway Museum in Union, Illinois, where it is today. It was even featured in the film Chicago Fire that was filmed in 2013. Also in 2015, some people trespassed on the museum grounds late at night and spray painted the car with graffiti, and then volunteers of the museum managed to get all of it removed. Today, it is used part of the bi-level set and seen running on the museum's track sometimes as well.
What you see right behind me is Chicago Northwestern 1.
50. Chicago and Northwestern 151 was built by Pullman Standard in 1960 and is a bi-level cab control car. This car was once used on the Chicago Northwestern passenger train many years ago and was also used as part of a commuter train on the railroad. Also, it has a control room where it would allow the train to run in both directions without having to turn around. Then later it was used on the Metro commuter line and was renumbered 8700 and would run on trains from locations in and out of Chicago, Illinois. Then later on the car was retired and in 1988 it was then acquired by the Illinois Railway Museum in Union, Illinois, where it is today, and is used part of the bi-level set and is seen running on the museum's track sometimes as well.
What you see right behind me is Metra 7658.
Metra 7658 was built by Pullman Standard in 1956 and is a bi-level coach. Originally, it was painted in a Chicago and Northwestern paint scheme and was once used on the Chicago Northwestern passenger trains many years ago, and was originally numbered 25 and was used part of a commuter train of the railroad. Then later it was used on the Metra line in downtown Chicago and saw service around the Chicagoland area on the system for many years and was renumbered 7658. Then the coach was later retired and most of the interior was stripped out by Metra before it became available, so it couldn't be restored to its original configuration. And the car sat in storage for several years and it even got spray painted with graffiti. Then in 2019, it was soon acquired by the Illinois Railway Museum in Union, Illinois, and the interior was restored and the graffiti was removed. Also, it is used part of the bi-level set and seen running on the museum's track sometimes as well, and also it likely remains with its current paint scheme as well.
What you see right behind me is Cook Paint and Varnish 101.
Cook and Paint Varnish 101 was built by American Car and Foundry in St. Charles, Missouri in 1917 and is a two-dome tanker car. This car was used at the Cook Paint and Varnish Company and it would be loaded with paint and even varnish, and it was even carried on freight trains from place to place many years ago. Then in 1997 it was acquired by the Illinois Railway Museum in Union, Illinois, and sometimes it is carried around on the freight train set on the tracks as well.
What you see right behind me is Belt Railway of Chicago 223.
Belt Railway of Chicago 223 was built by the International Car Company in Kenton, Ohio in 1953 and is a transfer caboose. This caboose was used for the Belt Railway of Chicago and Chicago, Illinois, and was used for maintenance of way service on the railroad as well. Then later on it was retired and in 1998 it was acquired by the Illinois Railway Museum in Union, Illinois, where it is today, and sometimes can be seen part of the train sets when being carried on the museum's tracks as well.
What you see right behind me is Illinois Central Gulf 199 458.
Illinois Central Gulf 199 458 was built by the Illinois Central shops in Centralia, Illinois in 1970 and is a wide vision extended porch caboose. This caboose was originally used for the Illinois Central Railroad and was originally numbered 9458 and was used as the train crew's office many years ago on the back of freight trains. In 1972, the Illinois Central and Gulf Mobile and Ohio Railroad merged to become the Illinois Central Gulf Railroad and the car was renumbered 199 458. Then later on, this caboose was retired and was then acquired by the Illinois Railway Museum in Union, Illinois, where it is today, and it is even used part of the caboose train as well.
What you see right behind me is Nakusa Paper 14.
Nakusa Paper 14 was built by Alco in Schenectady, New York in 1947 and is the 753/58 diesel locomotive built by that factory and is an Alco S1 type diesel locomotive. This locomotive was originally built for the South Omaha Terminal Railway and was originally number 5, and it operated as if it was a switcher locomotive there. Then it was sold to the Nakusa Paper Company in Nakusa, Wisconsin, where it was renumbered 14 and was used to do switching cars there as well. Then the locomotive was retired, and in 2000 it was acquired by the Illinois Railway Museum in Union, Illinois, where it is preserved today, and sometimes it operates on the museum's tracks as well.
What you see right behind me is Norfolk Southern 945.
Norfolk Southern 945 was built by Alco in Schenectady, New York, probably in 1959, and is the 299 22nd diesel locomotive built by that factory and is an RPA4U type yard slug. Originally, it was built as an RS3 and was used by the Southern Railway and was likely originally numbered 2677. It was used to move cars around and even hauled freight cars as well. Then in 1977, it was rebuilt as a yard slug by the Southern Railway and was reclassified as an RPA4U and was renumbered 9835. Then, when it joined Norfolk Southern in 1982, when the Southern Railway and Norfolk and Western merged that year, it kept the number. It was then renumbered 945. Then in 2012, it then went to the National Railway Equipment Corp in Silvis, Illinois, where it has been in storage. Then it was sold to the Illinois Railway Museum in Union, Illinois. Then in 2018, it was moved to the museum with Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe FP45 Diesel 92 as it returned to the museum after being repaired at the facility in Silvis. And also, this unit is like a parts unit for Louisville and Nashville FA2 314 to make it work again. Today, it is preserved here at the Illinois Railway Museum in Union, Illinois, where it can be seen today. And like I said, the unit is just a parts unit for the FA2, which is also at the museum as well.
What you see right behind me is Metra 1645.
Metra 1645 was built by Bombardier in 1978 and is a Highliner coach. This car was originally used by the Illinois Central Gulf Railroad on commuter trains going to and from Chicago Millennium Station and has been hauling passengers for many years, and this is its original number. Then in 1987, it was used by Metra, and the car was used for passenger service for many years. Then it was retired in 2015 and it was donated to the Illinois Railway Museum in Union, Illinois, where it can be seen today.
What you see right behind me is Metra 1534.
Metra 1534 was built by the St. Louis Car Company in St. Louis, Missouri in 1971 and is a Highliner coach. This car was originally used by the Illinois Central Railroad on commuter trains going to and from Chicago Millennium Station and has been used for hauling passengers for many years, and this is its original number. Then, when the Illinois Central and Gulf Mobile and Ohio railroads merged to become the Illinois Central Gulf in 1972, it was used by that railroad till Metra took over in 1987, and the car was used on the system for many years. Then it was retired in 2015 and it was donated to the Illinois Railway Museum in Union, Illinois, where it can be seen today.
Well, I hope you all enjoyed learning about trains with me today in Matthew Lap Train Guy segment show. Also, I hope to see you all again in the next segment. And if you didn't subscribe to my channel yet, the subscribe button is just down below the video screen. And if you didn't give my Facebook page a like yet, here's where you'll want to go. And if you didn't give the Instagram page a follow yet, here's where you'll want to go as well. And also, be sure to get your teesprings.com. I'll link in the description box below, along with Facebook and Instagram. And remember to subscribe to the Train Guy. So this is Matthew Lapp, host of Matthew Lapp Train Guy segment show. Sign out. Until next time, all aboard.